They don't want to play under pressure. They don't want to play under stress.
Well, welcome back to the Varside Spurs podcast. It's not in a pub anymore. We're just wherever we are. Yeah, it's been a fucking long time, Rich, since we've done this. End of February. Anything of note happened?
It's been quite quiet, hasn't it, on the Spurs front? Yeah, I don't know what we're going to talk about, to be honest, mate.
Lost. I think we should just turn it in now, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a surprise we haven't done a podcast for such a long time. It's been such a a bland, lacking in events or controversy season for us.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. To be honest, that's probably one of the reasons why I think some of us kind of switched off to. I know the others did. We'll sort of get into that in a minute, and how this might go forward. But for me, apart from, and I think the same for you, like life has been incredibly busy. I'm coming towards the end of a career that I'm changing to a different one, and there's been a lot of loose ends to tie up and a lot of things to sort out. Important things happening in my life at the moment. But also Spurs have pretty much killed any sort of joy I had in football. It's listening to the sort of podcasts, which have been good. I mean, I have sort of kind of kept up with a number of podcasts, but they've been rinse and repeat podcasts of doom and gloom of, various shades of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sort of similar here. It's been a year of changes. I don't know whether or not you could say I've changed career. I'm going back to doing something that I used to do many years ago, probably in addition to what I currently do as well. So
you're back on the strip scene, are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've decided to get my tits out for cash again, because when all else fails,
shake your money maker.
Well, that's what the Black Crows told me in the early 90s. But it has been. I mean, I've lucky in the meantime, I've been sort of privileged enough to be a guest on a couple of other podcasts. But my take on the whole thing has been I've seen the Spurs fandom around us lose their heads. I mean, with some justification, it's been bloody awful. It's been awful to watch on the pitch. Like a train coming down the tracks, we could see all this happening. I think it took us by surprise how quickly it was going to happen, or how quickly it happened. A lot of us saw Antonio Conte's appointment as being very similar to Jose Mourinho in the respect that it was only going to ever end like this. And that actually, I think the thing was that it surprised us all how soon and how quickly, it unraveled. But I kind of lost. I've not really changed in my feeling towards the club or the game or anything. I did sort of lose my patience with people a bit, though. Like everybody was losing their fucking heads over everything. And, I think the last time I went on Spooky's pod, which is a pleasure, as always is. And the only thing that I could say about it is, can we all get some fucking perspective, please? Although it's not been great. And at the time, everybody else was still convinced that Woolwich were going to win the league as well. So that made everything doubly difficult. But, I've had to sort of check out of it for my own sanity, not because of what's going on at the club, but because I think it's actually been quite cynical on part of some of the content makers, that they've sort of leapt on this as being, oh my God, this is the end of the universe. Let's churn out loads of really angry, ranty content and stoke it all up and be thoroughly, this, that, and the other. And of course, we've had a new fan movement that quickly turned into the old fan movement. And, and I just see, from my own perspective, I had to just sort of step away from it because I had a lack of patience with grown men and women acting like fucking children.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It kind of feels like we've had two seasons, because it's been broken up by that World Cup, And let's not forget, after the last season where we actually finished really strong and played really well, there was so much hope. And I was reflecting back on it, and like when we did these podcasts, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, that was this season, and where most of us predicted, like I think I predicted we'd finish second, and we'd had a good window. And it all pointed to that, that we'd got Richarlison in, we'd got Perisic in, we'd got, lots to really look forward to. We were looking like we were flying under Conte at that time. And then when the season started, it didn't start brilliantly, but then we kind of started to think, well, maybe this is a strategy, saving our energy for after the World Cup. We got easier games after the World Cup. Where did it all go wrong?
Well, it is odd, isn't it? I mean, and you are right. I mean, we flew across the line at the end of last season. We did have a good window. I mean, we bought some excellent players in over the summer. Unfortunately, we've not seen many of them in a Spurs shirt. And obviously as time has gone on, it has come out, players like Jed Spence, and one or two others, Conte didn't want anything to do with them, and I don't know. I mean, we'll never know what's gone on behind those doors and what conversations have happened. But what looked like being a club that was developing a functional recruitment strategy, actually, it became apparent that it was at least two, possibly three people in senior positions doing entirely opposite things. I mean, if I want to give it some human perspective, I would say that possibly the deaths that were suffered in and around Conte with his close friends and colleagues, and also his illness and needing to go off to hospital and then having to come back, maybe sooner than he should have done, all contributed. But fucking hell, I mean, when we all came back after the World Cup, we did all think, great, we're going to let the handbrake off now, didn't we?
Yeah. And I did speculate as well a bit sort of earlier, maybe sort of October, November time. I'm thinking like soon he's got to sign a contract because the speculation is going to start building. Will he, won't he stay? And then you do end up with, you can't help it. You end up in a situation where increasingly, as the clock ticks by, there becomes more and more uncertainty, and then there becomes a situation where at some point the manager becomes a lame duck, and even someone as strong as Conte becomes a lame duck. If we know he's not going to sign a new contract, or suspect that's the case, where's his clout in the dressing room anymore? And you sort of sensed, I suppose, as that clock was ticking by, that there was there were rumblings around that. The fact that he then didn't return from Italy at some point as well made it feel like he wasn't connected to the team. And then there were comments that were sort of from players, accepting that they should have done better, and we hadn't been sent out to play this way, etc. But they were also suggesting that perhaps the manager hasn't really got a grip on the situation to resolve it either. So it did seem to unravel quite quickly, and there seemed to be a few turning points. I mean, with hindsight, if he wasn't going to stay, we probably should have got rid of him around the sort of AC Milan game time or the Sheffield United game time, because they were absolutely shit shows of games. They stank the place out.
Yeah, I mean that AC Milan match in particular was baffling.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
We needed to win it, and we looked like we were trying to look for a draw or something. Yeah, like you didn't understand what the purpose of the game was.
No. I mean, it was. I'm sort of looking back on it now and reflecting, even with the benefit of hindsight and time and perspective. It made no fucking sense at all.
No.
At all. I don't know. Yeah, it is a very, very strange thing, and I think it will be something that will be of particular interest as time goes on, and perhaps as the truth becomes more apparent. Once things move on, once players have gone, once players have retired, once the situation becomes more historical, I suspect we'll start to get snippets of what actually happened. And perhaps it all hinged on a particular day, on a particular fallout, on a it might even be something quite innocuous. As these things happen, don't they? But you're right. That speculation on his contract. We all saw it happen with Harry Redknapp as soon as he was linked to the England job, and he refused to rule it out. That was it. I mean, that was the mind the gap season, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We
fell apart.
We were absolutely flying. I think what were we? 11 points ahead of Woolwich at the point.
11 or 12 points or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, when he was first linked with the England job, and then I think we picked up 3 points in the rest of the season or something. It was just, and we had shades of that this year, didn't we?
Yeah, it does become destabilizing. But I mean, I don't know. As you say, we might learn more in the future. But it almost felt, again, this is hindsight. And we were all angry at the time, but then you're looking back, I wonder if Conte already knew he wanted out around that time, because those selections and the tactics were terrible. It's almost like he was saying, "Sack me, please." And when we didn't, later in March, we ended up with Conte's rant, which is now become part of Premier League folklore. Thank you very much, Mr. Conte. But that was the I think he almost realized, if I want out, I'm gonna just have to basically tip a bucket of shit over everybody.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, isn't it, to look at? You can, like you say, on a fundamental perspective, you can say him not wanting the job but wanting to be sacked is, from his viewpoint, is a sensible thing, because obviously if his contract's terminated, he gets a great big chunk of cash. Whereas in actual fact, I would imagine a decent lawyer would look at what he did in the end and say, well, there's gross misconduct, you can get fuck all, and it is, perhaps it all hinged around the January transfer window. Maybe he was hoping to bring somebody in that didn't come in. One of these sort of big players that he could then sort of load with responsibility, because it all kind of really went wrong after Christmas, didn't it? So I like you say, we don't know. We can speculate, but we'll never know. I think it's an interesting thing also to look at it from his perspective, how much damage it will have done to his managerial profile.
I mean, to be honest, sorry, go on, Rich.
Yeah, well, I mean, just sort of thinking, things weren't going particularly well, but we were still in the top four at the time. We were in with a pretty good shout of qualifying for Champions League football. And if he'd have got us over that line and walked away at the end of the season, then, he sort of walks away with his reputation intact. Well, look, they gave me nothing to work with and I still gave them the Champions League. Whereas where he sits now, and I'm not saying that nobody's going to want to touch him, because he is still a man that carries some reputation, people are going to look at that and go, fucking hell, do we really want that sort of behaviour?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And I think there's been a lot of retouching of the picture and reframing a lot of things around this whole scenario. And I heard someone today saying that one of the biggest things that Conte ever did was to get Spurs top four last season. Well, I think that's bullshit. I mean, we deserved to be top four last season, and actually we were on the cusp of third before he just absolutely threw a hissy fit and it went mad. I mean, he did that rant, and we should have won that game and gone third. Of course, everything fell apart after that, but that was after that hand grenade basically chucked into the dressing room, and that's created everything from there. So we could have stood to have probably got fourth or maybe even third. Let's be honest, probably around that fourth or fifth area. But so we weren't massively off last year. And we had invested. We bought him the player that he wanted. He wanted Porro to play that system. But I just think he himself probably will come out of this looking okay. A lot of people will say, well, Spurs aren't a really great team anyway. He got them to fourth. He's a serial winner. Nobody wins anything at Spurs. And he'll be all right, Jack. He'll get another big contract somewhere. And yeah, he probably will win somewhere. But the true measure of the man was, could he turn this around? Now that is on Levy because he has chosen the wrong type of manager. Because you need a manager who can bring everyone together and evolve a team from where we're at, because there's still a lot of work to be done. But that's not him. We suspected where we were that we were then just going to be giving him the type of players he wanted. But we've also learned, which we should have known really, there's never enough of players that he wants. He's a spoilt child. He just wants everything all the time. And the history shows you that when he doesn't get it, he blows the place up and walks out. And his contracts are very short all the time. And like you say, we knew this was coming, but it ended a lot more rapidly than I suppose many of us thought it would.
Yeah. The thing about the sort of, as you referred to it, the hand grenade as well. I always have thought, I had a thought about this, that I mean, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a therapist or a counselling professional. I've had an awful lot to do with teaching people that have very complex trauma needs and things like that. So I've had I have a quite a lot to do with that as an aligned profession, and entirely unrelated to anything to do with this. But it struck me mind at the time, and it's always, every time this conversation has come up with people, it's always bubbled back up into me memory. Years and years ago, I was working with a therapy professional, and I was, at the time, I was working with groups of students who were trauma sufferers and often from violent backgrounds. They were quite abusive, and they would have these massive fits of anger and chuck furniture across rooms and stuff like that. And so we had to do quite a lot of work around understanding all this. And the reason I'm sort of going all the way around the houses to tell this story is that this one comment popped up one day, and this guy said to me, well, the funny thing about when they call you names, when they're insulting you and when they're saying things about you, is it's always a projection of things that they're worried about themselves. That's what it is. I can't remember the psychological sort of terminology that goes around it off the top of my head. But when he sort of said, these players can't work under pressure, these people, you make them want to work under pressure and they can't do it. And I thought, you're fucking talking about yourself, aren't you, mate?
Yeah.
You're the one that's feeling the pressure, No,
I absolutely agree. And that's interesting, the point you make on that, because, all successful clubs, which I think we have recognized and we've talked about, have a culture. He's part of that culture, and he's created a toxic culture, and there's certain type of talk that organizations and cultures have, which is, how you frame difficult things. Like as a challenge, as something like, for example, if you think about it logically, the climbing Mount Everest would probably be one of the toughest, most grueling, awful things you could ever do, where people die, you see dead people on the way up. If you make it against all the odds, you're probably that would be, in any other way of looking at it, would be probably one of the most traumatic things you could ever do physically and mentally. It's framed as one of the most incredible achievements in your life, as something really enabling and powerful psychologically and personally. And it's all about that framing. So where we're at, the challenge we're under, the type of, what we want to create in our culture needs people who can understand that and the challenge that we face, but actually coming out, ready for that battle and being proud of the fact that you belong to this culture, to Spurs, and it means something. And Ryan Mason started to talk about that a bit, didn't he, in terms of actually being, proud of the club and proud of the badge. And if you don't want to be here, then don't be here, because this should mean something to you. We didn't get any of that under Conte. We talked before, it was like he was doing us a favor, and if it didn't go his way, he was just going to shit on it. And it's exactly what he did. And that's a toxic leader. That's toxic masculinity, toxic culture overall. And we need some calming now. We need some, those players need some reassurance, some guidance, some leadership. That's not leadership. That's micromanagement. And micromanagement is a completely different thing. Like every little thing you do, every little pass you make, and all that kind of stuff, that might work, for some, but for us, where we're at, where the whole organization needs to come with someone who's a good leader. It's like, the parable of the elephant, trying to turn that around. It won't turn unless it wants to. And that's the sort of leader we need. And I'm hoping the new man is that. And before we get on to that, actually, there's a couple of other things we'll do, but that's what I'm hoping. He seems that sort.
Yeah. I mean, you're entirely right. I think the parallel that springs to mind is, it was put down as being a bit of a jokey comment at the time, but when Jose first arrived, and they said, "Oh, you've never had anything good to say about Tottenham in the past, and yet here you are as their manager," or however the question was framed. And he went, "Of course I like Tottenham, I am now their manager." They basically said, "Look, I like them, they pay my wages," And there was an element of it which was refreshing in the respect that, well, at least he's being honest. He's not pretending to kiss the badge. He's saying, look, this is a job. But the other side of it was him saying, I don't fucking care. Like, I think the comment was pajamas, wasn't it? I wear the club's pajamas while they pay my wages, And it's that's it's another variant of the same thing. It's not leadership. It's partisanship. It's being a mercenary. It's I care because you pay me to care. I'm not invested in this project. I'm not here to lead you. I'm here because there's a lot of zeros on the end of my paycheck.
Yeah, I know, and players will see through that. Okay, if everything's going brilliantly and everything's in place, then they'll be okay with that. They'll get through it. But at the moment, it isn't that. And good organizations tell, if you like, in part of the kind of culture of it, they tell stories of the past and the past players and the past successes. Tell stories that will resonate with the players in terms of how you overcome things, and share personal things about that. And then what happens is you end up with people around you that feel empowered and feel proud to belong to something, because they sense the history and what that means to you, and how you also can be part of that. And I think Kane understands it, and some people do, but that needs to be if you like, part of the initiation to get those players and keep those players who understand that and feel actually that this is actually something special to be part of. It might not be right now, but it will be again.
Yeah, very much. And I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult to foster that sort of buy-in and imagination and loyalty, I suppose, comes into it. In one of the top clubs in the top league in the world of a professional sport, who is also remunerating you very well. I remember when I left school, I was an apprentice at a dumper truck factory. The most uninspiring things that you could imagine. They made dumper trucks and concrete mixers. When we went for our initial training, the guy, I'll never forget him. Actually, this is 30 odd years ago. The guy's name was John Mander, and he did the whole sort of induction to the factory, and we had the whole bloody history of Benford's and why you should be proud to work there. And they had all of this bloody spiel about the fact that it was our machines that built the Thames barrier and our machines that did this. And we were all like, we sort of came out of it, and that's always stayed with me. We were like fucking rooting for Benford's, We'd never go and work for Thwaites, those other bastards down the road that did the same thing, So, and I mean, that's like construction equipment.
But then you feel
people,
exactly, mate.
If you can get a load of cynical teenagers that have just fallen out of high school like we were, like year one apprentices, like if we can get them stoked up about painting dumper trucks yellow for a living, which is what I did, then fucking hell, it shouldn't be difficult to do it for playing for a Premier League football team.
Who get paid handsomely for it too.
But exactly,
but that, exactly that case in point. You go away feeling, do you know what, blimey, I've been part of something really special. There must be something special about me because I'm part of that, and you there's a sense of connection to that overall, and that's where you got to get to, isn't it? You're part of that as well. So Anyway, so if we just finish off on maybe the best and worst moments then of this season before we look at going forward. So
do you know the worrying thing? The worrying thing about this question is, it's all such a blur. I don't think I've got a best. Honestly, like I can't think of anything.
If I say one, maybe I think it might be yours as well. I'm not going to try and lead you here, but I'm going to say Kane equaling Greaves' record.
Yeah, I mean, equaling that record and then going on to beat it, you know, I mean, that, but, you know, by the time those things happen, the wheels were coming off, which I think tarnishes that a little bit. I think we'll look back on that more fondly than I experienced it at the time. You are right, though. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to witness, you know. Will it ever be topped at the club? You know, probably not ever. That he will probably be the club's top goal scorer
all time,
you know, and until it all sort of turns over and some other bloody sports take over as a national.
Until Leandro Damal comes back and, you know, smashes the record within 3 seasons.
Well, Lord knows. But
worst
moments.
I
mean, the Sheffield.
Yeah.
Just
that was a debacle, wasn't it?
You could see it coming as well.
Yeah.
We all knew before it started this was what was going to happen.
And that for me was probably one of the turning points with me thinking, "Fuck this!" and this pod and everything. I'd really at that point where I'm thinking, and you know, they don't care. Why should
no?
Yeah, you know. Yeah. So
I don't know. That was bad. But I mean, this isn't even me being wise after the fact. You know, I mean, I think if you look through my Twitter, if you search it, I've got a mate who's a Sheffield fan, and he said to me before the game, "What do you reckon's going to happen tonight?" And I said, "You are going to beat us tonight." You know, and he said, "Nah, we've got 5 or 6 first team players out. We're on a shoestring. You know, your Spurs, you'll have a bit more faith." And I went, "You don't know how bad we are." You know,
it was the most arrogant team selection as well. It was absolutely awful team selection, and we deserved to get beat. And like you say, you could see it coming from moment one, and which was one of the most frustrating things, you know. And another one of the, I suppose, worst moments is that we just only could ever play for one half. Yeah.
And you know, special mention to Andy, late of this parish, still breathing but not podding. You know, who picked up on this very early in the season, didn't he? You know, what the fuck is this all about? Why is it? You know, and I think I was guilty of giving that a free pass for a long time, because I was very much of the opinion that this is got to be a conscious decision to save legs after the World Cup. You know.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's what we all thought, but turned out to be a crock of shit as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can look forward. Actually, just before we do look forward, I suppose we should look forward to the way this pod might go in the future, shall we?
Yeah.
Just briefly. I mean, we kind of we're looking to evolve this. So if anyone's listening and got any good ideas that they want us to chip in as well, and with, you know, things that they like about the pod or anything that they would like to add, then feel free to either message us directly or, you know, whichever way you want to do it. We'll listen. But it looks like Steve and Andy have got very, very busy lives indeed, and probably not going to be available to do many of these at all. So they'll join us at some point, I'm sure, but principally it'll be us two, if you can stomach that, and some guests every now and then.
Yeah. So it's been, I mean, I'm trying to think when I joined now, because I mean, my life's changed massively since I started podding with you lot. And in and amongst all that, it's difficult to keep track of the time. But you know, there's been quite a lot of changes. There were half a dozen people that used to regularly contribute. Some have gone off and had babies, and you know, some have changed jobs,
gone off to be babies.
Yeah. And it's just me and you, isn't it now? So
that's it.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, you know, if we want to try and evolve it a little bit, anybody that's got any inputs, then let us know. If you want to hear things of interest, a bit more of some stuff and a bit less of stuff, so long as you don't want more Steve Worrell and Leslie and Ritch, then you'll be all right. Because you won't get that, unfortunately.
That's it. Yeah. Oh dear. Anyway, let's look forward to the what's going to happen next season. So, what I'll start with actually, before we get to Big Ange, as people have been calling him, is the revelation that Paul O'Keefe came up with, which was that Spurs are set to tear up a number of contracts and get rid of some players in what he called a massive rebuild. That would be interesting. Matt Law today in the Times has apparently suggested that we'd listen to offers for Sanchez, Dyer. Who else was it we mentioned? Oh gosh, slip my mind now. But another significant player, and also Lloris has announced that he's going.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of these are timely, aren't they? I'm not on the hate Eric Dyer train. He's been with us for a good number of years now. He's been, I think, 9 years. He's been at the club, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And he's performed admirably at times, less admirably at other times. But in 9 years, there's an awful lot of opportunity for both of those things. I think it's time he moved on for his sake as much as ours. And like you say, we're looking for a new captain. I think that's going to be the biggest one to fill. I mean, goalkeepers worth their money are not easy to come by, are they?
No,
I mean, in terms of this big sort of this alluded to big sort of bonfire of player contracts, I think it might be the most sensible way of going forwards. We've got 18,000 players out on loan that will probably never come and play for Spurs again, haven't we? And it's interesting that I've noticed in the last 48 hours there's suddenly started to be these the undone believers, that they think fucking he's going to come back and suddenly turn into a footballer and give it up, guys, for Christ's sake. I mean, it'll be interesting, and I know we're not going to be able to go throughout this podcast without mentioning his name at least once. I wonder if now finally we're going to have the big one-off painful rebuild that a certain Mr. Pochettino advised us to have 4 years ago, because doing it piecemeal and little bits here and there with the odd good signing has not worked, has it?
No, I think you're right. And it would be interesting. I mean, it feels like it as you say, the piecemeal approach just doesn't seem to have changed the dynamic enough. It almost feels like it needs a shake, and that kind of significant rebuild. Even with players like I like you say, I'm not really a Dyer hater, and I've always thought Davies is a decent player, but people like him might also be a casualty of this rebuild. And I'm probably right. There just needs to be a churn that happens to be able to bring some feel of change to this dynamic, and it's going in a particular in a new direction. That's not to lay the blame at their doors. I mean, of course, we do think that people like Davies and Sanchez can be upgraded, but I wouldn't say Davies would be immediately on your radar. But it's we just need a change, don't we? Really, to start this whole new process.
Well, we do, and I think it's important to bear in mind that if we do, we're obviously critical of a lot of the things that Antonio Conte said about us as a team and as a club. But one of the things that he has said, and one of the things that I think Jose Mourinho alluded to before as well, was that players are very comfortable at Tottenham. And if it's people like Ben Davies and Eric Dyer and maybe Davinson Sanchez that think that, perhaps they can just rest on their laurels and they'll always have a contract and they'll always have a job, then it is possibly, I mean, Ben Davies, I think possibly is the least inviting of criticism. I think he's been a very reliable player, and he's actually spent an awful lot of time on the bench as well. So it's not as if he's been guaranteed a starting place. But when he's been called upon, when Sergei Reguilon or Ryan Sessegnon or whoever it has been that has been playing in that left side has fallen into bits, he's come back in and 99 times out of 100 has done a reasonable job of filling the gap. So. I think there's a lot of respect that are due to some of those players, but I think it's time that those that have been here the longest were got shot off, aside from possibly one or two notables.
Yeah.
But
and ones that always give everything. I mean, that Kane and Son could still play for any team. And also, they are hungry. They still feel hungry. So that I think that is different. But
I think the big question is do we get the option to keep Harry Kane?
Well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's all right. Benzema's going, isn't it? And they're apparently coming for him.
I think he wants to. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. But if we cast our mind back to that chat he had with Gary Neville, he said he'd be lying if he said he didn't really want to beat Alan Shearer's record. So and we are not going to let him go to another Premier League club. So if we can persuade him to stay until the end of the season and then look at where we're at. I mean, you think about it. If he comes to the end of his contract and he's got free choice, we should be able to offer him a contract comparable with anybody. I mean, you're looking at £100 million player. If you're talking £25 million a season, you could say, well, we'll offer you £500,000 a week. You stay with us. That you are getting to the point where you're going to lose him for free anyway. So they might as well offer him a mind-blowing contract, which is more or less like buying a player of that size, and he's guaranteed, of that stature, I should say. And I think that's I mean, like the Forbes thing recently came out, we're the third most profitable team in the world, and I don't just mean football, any team on this planet. We could do it. And maybe that is part of the strategy, that if we keep him, we show him that we are doing this rebuild quicker than, like you were suggesting, instead of piecemeal, and then say, look, we'll offer you a contract commensurate with any of the best out there. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this stage now, isn't it? I think the difficulty is it isn't going to be about money. I don't think now, because he probably bathes in cash every day. He probably washes his armpits with £20 notes or whatever millionaires do. So it is going to be about whether or not he can see that he's going to have something to put in a cabinet, isn't it? And I think that will be the be all and end all. This is the last throw of that dice, if we even have that throw.
Yep, absolutely. So we've seemed to have arrived at a new manager in a sort of circuitous fashion. We all hoped, I suppose, after the last one that it might be Pochettino, but he's done the dirty on us. Then we had Nagelsmann, that was in the frame. We sort of seemed to be really excited about that. Then Slot got his tits out for us, and we were all getting excited about that as well. And then that never happened. But we now look like we might be about to sign a new permanent manager. What about that sort of route to get into this point at the moment, Rich?
Well, I mean, I called Nagelsmann years ago. I thought when his Leipzig beat us in the Champions League, when Pochettino was still at Spurs, I said to my mate Chris, who I was there with at the time, he should be the next Spurs manager, because that Leipzig side were like Poch's early Spurs. But on with added adrenaline. They were an incredible thing to watch. And so I wasn't surprised to see him go on and do great things. I didn't really believe at any point that he was going to come to us. And then I saw him riding a skateboard and thought, fuck him, I don't want him anywhere near the club. So there was that. I mean, this goes back to what I was saying at the start of the pod about social media and speculation and overhype and all this stuff. I honestly believed that we would have Pochettino come home. I thought that's what was happening, and I thought he was. And he'd said some things when he was at PSG about being offered Harry Kane, the chance to sign Harry Kane, and saying that he turned it down because he wouldn't have done that to the club because he loved the club and all that. And he was back in England, and he was out of work, and he just seemed to be sat there, and he was doing all this stuff. Him and Jesus Perez were posting stuff on their social media of them in their Spurs, training gear and all that, and you thought, fucking, and then And then obviously it didn't happen. And what happened was that sort of rolled on. And after a few days, I thought, fuck, it isn't going to happen because it would have happened. And then I thought, no, it's because they don't want to disrupt the side, and they'll wait until the season ends, and they'll let Ryan Mason do his job. And when Mason didn't start picking up shitloads of points immediately, I thought, no, they would do it now because we need a stabilising force. And it was at that point it not happening that I thought, no, he's not coming. He's definitely not coming. And I think a bit of me died. You know, I mean, I don't want to sort of be too hyperbolic about it, but I did adore him, you know, and I still do, you know, and I still do adore that time. But I'm also quite prosaic, and although I wish with all my heart he hadn't gone to Chelsea, I can understand why he would go there. He's got a living to earn. I don't think he owes us any loyalty because we sacked him when we should have backed him. At that point is when we should have backed him. But then on the flip side of that coin, you know, I have spoke to a couple of people that have reminded me, look, you know, he checked out, you know, come that Champions League final, we were all expecting him to leave to go to Man United after that final. You know, and so, and I'd kind of forgotten about all that. So I sort of have insulated myself a little bit about it. I never really wanted Slot because I don't think that where he was coming from was a particular, I didn't think he had demonstrated anything to get excited about, you know? I don't know, he reminded me a bit too much of Christian Gross, maybe. I don't know. Like there was something about him. I just thought, I don't really want this guy. So I didn't jump on that hype train. And if I'm honest, I don't know anything about Big Ange, as they're all already calling him, you know. The only thing I do know is I've got a good Twitter friend called Steph, who's a Celtic fan, who he and I spoke about him a few weeks ago, and I asked him his opinion, and he said, look, he's a good manager, but I think his side will get torn apart in the Premier League. Like he's got some obvious defensive weaknesses in his tactical setup that you can probably get away with in the SPL, but as soon as we face tough sides in Europe, they really show it up, you know. And so I sort of went, oh, right, okay, well, obviously they won't hire him then, you know, and apparently that appears to be what we're doing. So, you know, and Steph messaged me again this afternoon and he said, you know, what's your thinking on this? You know, and he's obviously quite sore about it because he's just won them all these pots, you know, they've just won the treble up there again, haven't they, or what have you, and he's about to sort of walk out, and I think he's a bit stung because he's been making all these noises about staying at Celtic for a long time and saying you won't believe how long I'm going to be at this club and all that. And you know, and you know, we've lifted a skirt up a little bit, has shown him some leg, and if it is true, he's off, you know. So and I said, like I said to him again, like I'm a bit nonplussed about it. I'm not going to get excited about it because I don't know anything about him yet. I've never seen his Celtic play. I watched that video of, you know, Bankrupt Spurs put that video up yesterday of him doing that Australian team talk or that pre-lunch talk or what have you. And everybody's getting really excited about that. And the only thing I took away from that is that it sounded like his dad's Jose Mourinho, you know, but, you know, he's just bit in here about his dad moaning about when he won, you know, with Australia. But, I don't know. I mean, it seems a strange thing. What are your thoughts? Tell me what you think about it.
Well, yeah, like you, I thought Pochettino would be the logical choice. Like that one was kind of after everything that had happened, it looked like this is an easy win. You know, it's just the one that's going to lift the fan base. Even just as he was on his way out and Stellini was on his way in, the chants of the fans were he's magic, you know, in the stadium. And I just thought, how can Levy resist that? It's just basically the fans just saying, just give us this and we'll forgive, you know, and we'll maybe we can start to heal. And it you know, it as you say, increasingly it never looked like it was going to happen. I'll let you into a little secret, and around the sort of around about sort of mid-March, I'd never even heard of him at the time, but Arne Slot was a name that a friend of mine given to me because he had been asked to do some due diligence on him as a prospective candidate. And I'm like, who is this? I mean, I'd never even heard of this guy. Bearing in mind that when we were in the Champions League final, he hadn't even played a single match as a manager.
No.
You know, so he is a relative unknown, but we were very serious about him from the beginning and then appointing him. And I think it just kind of, for some reason, went wrong, probably because Feyenoord, wanted more compensation, perhaps, than we expected. But it just seemed to go wrong. But also around about April, I was told by the same person that actually we had reached out to chat tentatively to Pochettino, and according, there's a lot of people that are saying that we never even said anything, but the same person who had helped with that side of things had said no, we have. So I don't know, nothing more was said. I don't know whether we backed off or he backed off. It seemed like a light touch, but it was but it is not something we'd completely shut our eyes to. But I think we decided, or it seems to be decided, to go a different way. I would say that not only is Big Ange, as everyone's calling him, not my first choice, but I don't imagine is either the club's first choice. But we might have accidentally arrived at someone who could be a really good fit for the club. I suspect he's tactically adept enough to look at what we've got and adapt. And he's, at least we're going to get to see an attacking brand of football that we haven't seen for a long time after the shit we've seen for the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things I'll sort of come back to on it. That I never believed any of this. We never even spoke to Pochettino thing. I've not believed it from the word go. Right. I mean, there's a couple of big content creators out there that have really got their bollocks in a twist over this. And there's one guy in particular who as a human being, I have a massive amount of time for. I'm not going to say who it is, even tangentially. I've got a massive amount for him as a human being. I think he's a really nice guy, and I've known him for a few years. And he's gone full double barrels on this, never even talking to Poch business. And I've always looked at it and thought, this is fucking horse shit. If that's what you honestly believe, I don't understand how you've got the competence to set up a direct debit in your personal life. Because if you think that's what's happened, and these people have got links with the club, and they've all they're in with the club, and they make film content, and they do all this, and you just think, you're like, fucking nut. I've never ever bought it. I'm not saying I know better, but it just didn't make any sense in any sense of the word. There was the thing about the Pochettino thing. I loved him, right? And I don't want to sort of use up all this time talking about Poch, because he's dead to most people now. So, But there was a thing like that couple of years was the last. I've got quite a cynical view on modern football. I'm getting more and more interested in lower league football and less interested in Premier League football. I've dropped international football years ago. I didn't even watch a single match of the World Cup. I'll tell a lie. I had the telly on when the final was on, but I was actually doing something else. So I might have watched a bit of that, but that aside, the Pochettino thing was the real fairy tale for me, and it was a fairy tale partly because it was happening at Spurs, but I believed it was like a last hurrah of an organic connection in between a manager and a group of players and the fans, and I think it's a very special thing. And I've been trying to write cogently about this for a couple of years now, and I've written a few things for various fanzines and that, and I'm trying to write something for us about it. But when it all finished, it kind of tore me apart a little bit, because it felt like a premature end to that fairy tale, and it felt like I wasn't actually quite ready to let go of it. The year before we got to the Champions League final, I had the massive tattoo that I've got done, and everybody sort of thought, oh well, I'd gone back into being fully into Spurs and a massive fan. And actually, I sort of said no. It was a bit of a memorial, really. It was me kind of recognizing that the time of football, that era of football that I adored, had come to pass, and that it was almost over. And it was pretty much Pochettino's tenure at Spurs that would mark the passing of it. And when he went, that kind of would mark the end of it. And there was something about him coming back to finish the unfinished job which for a moment just gave me that glimmer that perhaps that little bit isn't quite, that flame ain't quite extinguished. And then, of course, when he went to Chelsea, it was like somebody's just poured a bucket of cold water over the coals, and it's done now. Like, football to me is a very different thing. And Poch going to Chelsea is the final straw. It's not the thing that's made me throw me dollies out the pram, but it's the final straw. I feel very differently about it. And I've started to look at it much more in a different way, in a much more prosaic way. So that was that thing. And I never believed that we didn't try and get him back. And I don't believe it's that possibly that the club decided not to reappoint him. He might have gone, right, I'm actually in a different position than I was when I was at your club, and I want certain things to come back. And the club might have said, actually, we're not prepared to make those concessions. He might have asked for a shed load of money. You know, he might have asked for 20 million quid a year or something. And the club might have said, look, this is ridiculous, you know? You know, so there's that side of it, you know.
There was one comment I heard, which was reported that actually what may have happened, again, it's all just pure speculation, but what may have happened was that when we did want him back, because we did go after him, right, when he was at PSG, and we tried to get him as a replacement for Mourinho, and it didn't come off. The club saw it as, because he renewed his contract and got a bigger deal, that they saw it as a cynical move to improve his contract to PSG. I don't know. I'm not sure I believe that, but that was something that was reported, and we'd kind of perhaps not let go of that. But I can't see that personally. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know, because there would be a massive double standard in that, wouldn't there? Because you know, we pulled the trigger on him as soon as things were bad.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're operating in this ruthless world, you've got to expect the people you operate with to be equally ruthless, don't you? Anyway, I mean, perhaps that's all we need to say on Pochettino, especially at the moment. I mean, on Slot and Feyenoord, I looked at it from the outside and thought, well, you know, we basically tempted him, and he thought, you know, I thought perhaps it was not a done deal, but something that was likely to happen once they'd finished their season, and that Feyenoord basically just went, look, how much money do you want to stay? You know, and it might just be as simple as that. You know, they might have said, you know, look, guy, you know, you are a young manager early in your career. Yes, you've just won this league. We're prepared to put our money where our mouths are. Look how Tottenham treat their managers when it doesn't go right, you know.
And I believe he's got a very, very young family as well, and that could have been a consideration in it all. And so many things. We forget that these people are still human. That you know, that even though they have careers and career trajectories, that they still are humans with human emotions, and sometimes you can feel one thing's right at one moment, and all of a sudden your gut tells you last second no. You know, you know, there's all sorts of things at play.
Well, you know, this is it. I mean, I make all my major decisions on intuition, you know, like you know, I'm supposed to be one of these, you know, I have a science DPhil, and I work in a material science thing, and I'm quite analytical, and I'm very good at running a business and being cut and dry about numbers and things. But when it comes down to it, I make all of my life decisions in my gut.
Well, do you know what? I mean, it sounds silly, but your brain, you have a second brain technically in your gut. It drives you, and that's why they call it a gut instinct. Is that actually it's the same sort of network, and so your gut should be trusted quite a lot. Even though my guts are quite terrible at times, but you know.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I mean, anyway, before we get accused of verbal diarrhea, let's talk about this new guy.
Let's go.
I think we're probably a bit late for that accusation, aren't we?
Well, I'm sure. But I mean, one of the concerns I had, which is why it was further down on my list, was that you know, what's this guy done? And I remember I had a chat with you know, a friend in a WhatsApp group, and I think we were at crosswise, and I was saying, look, he's 57. What's he done? He's won this up there in a 2-bob league. And don't get me wrong, you know, I say that, and I know I got lots of my family are Scottish, so they'd probably be after my blood after saying that. But you know, let's face it, you know, it's only ever going to be one of two teams that are going to win it up there, and the rest are also runs. So you know, it's not the biggest of achievements. He's managed teams in Australia and managed teams in Japan and that. So he's not exactly. Not only is he not coming from a European background, but they're not exactly the best leagues in the world. So that will, obviously those were some of my concerns, because I'm thinking, how will that translate stepping? That's a massive step up. You only have to be, if we've seen, a half decent manager to be able to get success out of those teams. And so when I said, him being 57, and someone said, well, you can't rule him out because his age. I said, no, it's not his age. I'm not worried about the fact that he's 57. It's the fact that he's 57 and a 30-year career, and we never even heard of him before. And what's he done? So there's that. But then when you look at also that, obviously you have other people like Arsene Wenger came from Japan and did pretty damn well. That if he is still a good manager and a good man motivator, that's what we need. And I think that I'd mentioned it, but a couple of people mentioned it along, in some of the WhatsApp threads that we have, that actually this whole thing is bigger than just the manager. I think it's top to bottom, and we've just seen, even with two of the best managers in the world, historically speaking, we can't make it change. So it's not just that. And I'm hoping that, with the appointment of Munn, the new, the backroom staff changing, looking at the culture of the club, looking at the way the club is run, perhaps Levy stepping back and Munn taking over more the football business of it all, that eventually we're going to sort of turn this around. And you look at clubs like Sevilla, right? They've just won the European Cup for the 7th time, right? Who's their manager? I don't know his name.
No fucking idea.
No idea. The guy, I saw him on the touchline. He looked about 104. I'd never even heard of him. And what's he done before? And then you look at Barcelona. They just bring ex-players through.
Yeah.
Like, the equivalent of Masons. Okay, but they've probably had a better career, but they bring ex-players through who know the club culture or the club way of playing, but they're not got any track record.
Well, I mean, you've only got to look at Liverpool if you want to bring it a little bit closer to home. I know it's no longer the case at Liverpool, but when you and I were young kids, Liverpool had the backroom boys. Everybody that came through into the managerial and coaching staff had come up through the club. I think Roy Evans might have been the last one, mightn't it? But you had a whole raft of people that were inured in what Liverpool Football Club was.
Yeah.
And that was how you got to the top in that job. You didn't get brought in as a mercenary. You had to know your job. Boot room boys, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not entirely displeased with him based on his either his inexperience in the Premier League, or, like you say, it is a slight. Well, not even. It's not. I'm not concerned, actually. If I'm going to just be totally honest, I'm not even concerned that he's not really won anything in a major league, because the guy that we adored the most until he signed for Chelsea had got relegated with Espanyol and managed Southampton for 15 games or so before he came to us. And look what happened there. I mean, yes, he was a young man with fresh ideas, yada, yada, yada. But, if we're talking about top flight experience, he was pretty fresh. And I mean, he started out with Espanyol's women's team, didn't he? And then he went to the men's team, and then he got relegated, and then he got sacked. And then he came and replaced Nigel Atkins, and everybody hated him at Southampton because he'd come and replaced a popular manager, and we plucked him from nowhere. That summer that all of us, not all of us, but a lot of us, including me, were desperate for Louis van Gaal to come and take over at Spurs, So fuck it, why not? I mean, he seems an amiable guy. He seems, fuck it, he's not Jose Mourinho, so get him in.
Nah. But I mean, look at Newcastle. Would we've employed Eddie Howe? He'd just taken a team down.
Well, I mean, I know that there were a lot of people when we appointed Nuno that was saying that we should, and I know that we should have brought him in, and I know people have been saying for a long time we should have been watching him, So I don't know whether or not Eddie Howe would have been such a left field appointment, but I get your point. I mean, he's certainly done well. I know, he's at a financially doped club, but as yet, they've not splashed the cash obscenely in a Manchester City way to get to where they've got. He's done it through merit, hasn't he?
Yeah. No, but the whole vibe of the club feels different, I suppose. They can sense what they're probably about to become. So it feels like the mood and the feel about what they're going to become is part of the shift in that culture, because they haven't won a trophy for longer than us.
Oh no, it's ridiculous.
It's like, I mean, since the 60s or something, they haven't won a trophy for horrendous amount of years, and yet now they feel like they're on the cusp of something really big. I mean, obviously that's financially doped, but you can see how a feeling about what a club is going to do can change quite quickly.
Yeah, let's just to throw one thing into the conversation, because I just want your opinion on it more than anything else. Graham Potter. What are your thoughts on him as an alternative to Ange Boston?
I mean, we all know that Andy was a big fan of Graham Potter, and still is. But I'm less so now. I think actually, in light of what De Zerbi's done, perhaps what we're seeing is the culture and the setup at Brighton is the most important thing, and that because they already seem to be like, when De Zerbi goes, the talk is that they've already have identified who their next manager will be, so they can have a train of different managers, and like people like De Zerbi who've had a nothing career beforehand, and come through and has done really well. They've identified the type of manager for the type of player and the profile of the club. It's the setup of the club that is the important thing. And I think since Potter's gone and did an absolutely woeful job at that place, I think he's gone down in my estimation as a coach, to be honest. And maybe I'm wrong, but the fact that De Zerbi's come in and gone again up a gear with that lot, it strikes me as that maybe Potter isn't the master tactician and manager that we thought he was, because he certainly wasn't able to motivate those players. From lots of reports of them taking the mick out of him behind his back. So they didn't have the clout within that dressing room. And you think of what ours is like.
No, I mean, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, his time at Chelsea, because I think he didn't do himself any favours by turning into the milk tray man once he got the job.
That's true.
He did sort of start sporting roll neck sweaters and giving it the cultured jazz fan look. But I mean, strangely enough, I was looking at it the other way round, in the respect that I wondered whether or not, and I suppose you're a little bit right. We are a little bit in agreement, should I say, on the cultural aspect, that I thought perhaps De Zerbi's done so well based on the groundwork that he had done. And actually I thought his Brighton teams were always very difficult to play against. And they were always very pleasing on the eye in terms of chance creation and all that sort of business. But I mean, I think, I wonder whether or not in that light, we will actually get a true estimation on how good Potter is by looking at what position Brighton are in this time next year. Because if De Zerbi's flown off the back of his coattails, it'll come apart for him this year. And if it is a cultural thing at the club, then you're right, they will just continue. I thought it was laughable that we were linked with De Zerbi. I thought that was that would have been a real left field appointment. And I mean, I'm looking forward to us podding in about 3 weeks once Ange has signed a new contract at Celtic and we've appointed De Zerbi. Or
Christmas time when Ange gets pumped and we're after De Zerbi. As he's been sacked.
I mean, I was always, a bit ambivalent about Potter as an individual. I've not warmed to him. He's not somebody that I find particularly charismatic, or, he's not somebody that I really would have liked managing my side. But I did think he would have been a good shout for it, certainly in terms of rectifying that sort of like you were saying, this desperation for decent football, which, if we're honest, if we're brutally honest, we've not seen since 2018, not 2019.
No.
You know, I mean, once we moved out of White Hart Lane and started playing on a bigger pitch, all of that Pochettino press really went aside.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think that's why perhaps this manager has started to get me a little bit excited, because of all those managers, he's the most attack-minded, the most in the mold of a Spurs type team. And I know, you know, a lot of people have said that Daniel Levy should feel ashamed and retract the statement about the Spurs DNA. But actually, you know, of all the managers in terms of playing style, I think he's going to be the closest to it. We just have to see, won't we? You know, like time will tell.
I've just had a really, really bad flashback in this, you know, most attacking manager and Spurs DNA style.
Aussie Ardiles.
It's going to be fucking. It's Aussie Ardiles all over again.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh shit.
Oh fuck it.
Yeah. We'll enjoy it while it lasts.
We didn't get Klinsmann in to play up front. You know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we'll score 5 but concede 6.
Yeah. Mind you, you know, I say that, you know, we laugh about it, you know, but that's the value of attacking, entertaining football. One of my favourite games that I ever went to, you know, which is a really odd thing to say, was losing the North London derby in Martin Yol's first home game, the 5-4.
Yeah.
And that was like, I came away from there thinking, do you know what? The clouds have parted. That was fucking great fun, apart from the fact that we lost, you know, because we'd seen all that turgid Santini football for the preceding sort of 3 or 4 months. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're playing football again. Yeah. So maybe that'll do, you know? Yeah,
I think you're right. I mean, to be honest, it's like, do you know what? We keep mentioning this, man. This is driving me mad now. But when Pochettino took over, his results weren't brilliant at the beginning, but you could see what he was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
You could see that. Wow, if this clicks, it's going to be great.
Clicks, yeah.
And
in the end,
you know,
it took it to bounce off somebody's arse off a free kick at Aston Villa for it to all click. But when it did, you know, I mean, I think going forward, Lee, you and I are going to have like a penalty system for each time we mention that name.
It's that swear box.
Yeah, we're going to have a charity swear box, haven't we? And every Christmas.
I think so. And then at the end of it, £1 goes in each time, and then at the end of it, we just go for a big piss up.
Oh, we the charity. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we are the charity. That's it. Oh, yes.
Yeah. We're not going to need it. We're not going to give it to like children that need more biscuits or something.
Oh, no. We give it to 2 adults who need more beer.
Okay. Right. Okay. So there's the first feature of, you know, version 2.0. We'll have a Pochettino swear box.
I suppose we better round this up, shall we, mate?
Yeah.
It's gone on longer than I thought it was going to go on, for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was quite entertaining, actually. Yeah, I've missed it, and I've missed having something nice to think about for Tottenham.
Yeah. I think I don't know. Maybe it's a grand illusion, but I do feel more positive about the coming season. I think you know, it can't be any worse than the shit we've watched over the last 3 years. I think you know it's time.
Get relegated.
Oh, we could, and we could lose Kane and do that as well. I don't think so. I think we're not far away. You know, we've shown it. We're not that far away. In the season before, we were thereabouts in terms of those Champions League positions. With this year coming up, and we've got no other worries apart from the league and domestic cups, I think we can have a good crack at those. And I think we know that then you know, we've got 1 game per week after that. We can work on the team in that time, and I think it might just be the right time. Yeah,
I mean, you know, if we bring it back to the reason that we all thought Antonio Conte could shit miracles was because he came in and won the league in his first season at Chelsea, and he did that in a season where they were out of Europe. So maybe this will be that season for us, just with a different manager.
Yeah. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, mate, brilliant to speak to you again. And,
mate.
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.
They don't want to play under pressure. They don't want to play under stress.